In a public area, you have a right to be there. The freedom of speech is a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. Must be protected. Now, I'm sure we've all seen the videos of the First Amendment auditors, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. You have a right to photograph in public. You have a right to film the police in public. My name is Patrick Nolan. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of Missouri. This is Pat Talks Law. I was a reporter in a previous career. I spent 15 years as a reporter, editor, photographer, publisher, and owner of a weekly newspaper. I purchased a newspaper that had sub 1,000 monthly circulation, and over 6 months I took it up to 6,000 weekly. Phenomenal turnaround and success story. And ultimately I wound up selling that paper off when I went to college, and I did fairly well on it. I went back for my master's in mass communication. And while I was there getting my master's, I decided to go to law school. When I went to law school, I intended to do media law, to look at freedom of speech and protecting the rights of reporters and everyday citizens. Ultimately, I fell in love with criminal law, and I began doing criminal law as an intern in law school, and then I took a job with the Missouri Public Defender's Office. Now I'm in private practice. One of the big things about media law is access. In a public area, you have a right to be there. The freedom of speech is a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. Must be protected. Now, I'm sure we've all seen the videos of the First Amendment auditors, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. You have a right to photograph in public. You have a right to film the police in public. There are some rulings that have gone against that, and in the places that those rulings have gone against that, the court is wrong. There's a great case out of Massachusetts, the Glick case. Officers lost their qualified immunity when they arrested somebody for recording them in public because they knew they were violating his constitutional rights. They lost their qualified immunity that made them personally liable to lawsuit. Now, if you listen to the First Amendment auditors, you'll think that that means that the police can't do anything, you can go after them. And it's not the case. This was specific to those facts, and we're not going to get into that too much. But the essence of what I've been seeing when I'm watching these auditors, and God love them, I think that protecting your rights by exercising them is extremely important. But there's a line. Don't be an asshole.
It's extremely awesome.
That's high. Can you? Are they like right there?
Can you see?
Turn to the left. Oh yeah, there you go. On the money.
I would really appreciate not being on whatever it is you're doing. Okay, we'll call the sheriff's department.
Oh. This is City Hall, Missouri, Last City.
Can I help you? Did you need help with something, sir? Can we help you?
Oh, no.
Hey, Margie. Can I borrow you for a second? Can I help you?
Oh, no, just like natural.
Can
Can I help you?
Oh no, we're just here to video.
Okay.
So just act natural.
They're all going back. Alright guys, so we've pretty much cleared the room. We've been in here probably less than 2 minutes, not even, probably a minute and a half, maybe 2. And they cleared out all the offices.
I mean, there's some common decency. If you walk into a building, you stick a camera in someone's face, and then you're snide, snippy, smart-ass, or just silent, they're going to react as if you may well be a threat, and they're not wrong to do so. If you walked into my place of employment, stuck a camera in my receptionist's face, and she says, "Can I help you?" You say no. She says, "Well, what are you doing?" "It's my right." Well, in my place of employment, clearly, or where I work, clearly it wouldn't be. I'd throw you out on your ass. But the argument they're making is that in a public place, that is your right. Unfortunately, that's not true. On the street, in a public forum, it's 100% your right to photograph and film. Inside the county treasurer's office at the counter, no, that's there for a purpose. The purpose is conducting the business of the county treasurer's office. It's not a public forum for meetings, for public speaking, and you can be asked to leave. So that's where the auditors overstep what the actual rights are. And they do it in such a fashion with a lack of responsibility. And that's the backside of every right, is responsibility. You may have a right to do something, but you have the responsibility to do that appropriately. Let's take the Second Amendment. I'm a huge firearms guy. Yes, I have a right to strap my sidearm on and carry it. But I also have a responsibility to do that properly, to do that safely. On freedom of speech, you see somebody when the auditors are clearly in the public arena, public area. If they're on a city street, they're in the easement of the city street, walking along the side of the road, and then they get harassed and arrested. The officers are wrong. However, what you also see is they come up and they ask the person for ID. And then we get into that person saying, "Well, I don't have to show you my ID unless you have a reasonable and articulable suspicion that there's wrongdoing afoot."
And I am requesting your information. Did you give yours?
No, you don't have to, Tim.
You don't have to. They already.
Really?
You don't have to.
You can't articulate a crime you've committed. You don't have to give your identification.
Nobody asked you, ma'am. You're not an attorney.
And this is where the auditors run into a problem, because there's no requirement that the police officer tell them what they suspect. They have to be able to articulate it to the court if they're required to, not to the guy on the street. A high school buddy of mine, I'm not going to say his name, I hope he's watching, once told me, after we reconnected a few years ago, he's a cop now, and look, police can't lose on the street. We can't afford to, and they're not going to. They'll bring in more cops until they win. So when you get into that argument with the police officer on the street, it's going to end with either the police officer choosing to disengage or you going to jail. And maybe going to jail is what you want to do. And that might be your civil disobedience. That might be your thing. That's how you're going to promote the exercise of your rights. And you know what? Man, I'm all for that too. If that's what you're going out to do, to get into that kind of confrontation and get arrested so that you can seek a legal precedent, you know, brother, good on you. but you don't get to come back after that and decry the cops as tyrants and, you know, Nazis and slap a Hitler mustache on them. And no. They're doing their job, you're doing yours, the system works, we'll get to court, it gets settled out, and if they're wrong, you're probably going to win. Specifically, I'm going to reference one person, and I talked to them via email. I exchanged a couple of emails, and I asked for permission to use some of their videos, and they granted it to me. News Now Patrick. I love the idea of auditors. I love the idea of going outside, filming whatever the hell you want to film. Stand on the street, film. Stand outside the courthouse, film. Walk up to the doors, filming. You know, the courthouse steps is a public forum. There's nobody that's going to be able to make that argument and say, well, no, you can't assemble or film on the courthouse steps. You know, if that happens, you know, I'm happy to talk to you about it because it's a horseshit argument. But going inside the building and filming in the assessor's office, no, now we've got a problem. Okay? Because that's not a public forum. Filming inside the sheriff's office or the jail. Again, you're crossing the line when you cross into the actual place. Going into the sheriff's office filming, they may not care and they may not do anything. They might ask you to leave. Now, I saw one where they were in Oklahoma and they were filming outside of the sheriff's office and the deputies threatened to take them to jail. The word for that is prior restraint. Okay? Now we're crossing into lawsuit territory. Successful lawsuit territory. If you're arresting somebody prior restraint, calling it trespassing, and you're trespassing them because they're shooting video in a public place where they have a right to be, especially when there are other private citizens there as well, yet the police have a problem. Okay? That they don't have a reasonable state interest. That's a content-based interest. They don't like you because you're a jerk. So, now, if you are harassing people, if you're confronting people, impeding progress, things like that, that gives them the opportunity to tell you you have to go. So there's a line. And every case is going to be different. Every case is fact-specific. And you can't cross those lines. And you can't say arbitrarily, because this case is this case must be that. Not without a review of independent facts of each case. That's why lawyers get paid a lot of money. Because we look at the facts of this case, we look at the law, and then we apply the law to the facts. Or apply the facts to the law, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. There are things that bother a lot of lawyers. One of the things that bother lawyers, me specifically, is people that are wielding their rights without an understanding of what they are. A basic media law class is not complicated to find. You can find one at almost any university across the country. A lot of schools will allow you to audit a class. You go and you can take it without even being a student there. And if you're going to do First Amendment audits, you should. You should understand media law. You should understand the major cases in media law. You should understand that there are things you can and you cannot do. Unless you're saying that your protest, that your activism is to go out and violate an unjust law so that we can get it through the courts, so that you can get judicial opinions and try to change that. And if that's what your activism is, you know, good on you, brother. I love it. But if your intent is to go out and be arrested, it's really not appropriate to then condemn the police who actually arrest you. That's what you were seeking. Now, one of the current trends, and you're seeing it among the auditors and on YouTube, is using the audit as an opportunity to create a lawsuit.
The federal lawsuit against Beaver County, Beaver, Oklahoma. Now, we currently are still behind, but we're still trying to raise funds, guys.
This is, in my opinion, akin to the disability lawsuit craze that swamped California. You know, you had to have access for people with disabilities. If you didn't meet the disability requirements, anybody could sue, they could ask for damages, okay? And that wound up where you had professional disabled people creating lawsuits. They would go someplace, find a technical violation, and put some small family business out of business. And that might happen with the First Amendment auditors. However, they have to go into federal court, and at some point they're going to start getting shut down. And the end result of this is going to be a loss of right. We're going to lose some of the rights we have. And the reason that will happen is because we haven't exercised them with responsibility. At some point, the government's going to say, if you can't use this right responsibly, we're going to legislate that right away, or we're going to try and make some changes. And that's how we get time and place restrictions on the First Amendment. Okay, now government can establish reasonable time and place restrictions. Well, there will become reasonable time and place restrictions for filming inside a municipal building, or filming inside a county building, or a federal building. There already are. And that's what we're going to see as an outcome of the lawsuit mill that the First Amendment auditors are starting to generate. That's also an inevitable outcome of bad lawsuits. If you're going to be a First Amendment auditor and you're going to look at generating lawsuits, for the love of God, hire a decent attorney to write the damn thing for you. If you're doing a federal lawsuit pro se, and you're not actually an experienced attorney, you can be reasonably sure that there will be a lot of people looking at your lawsuit and laughing. And most of them will be attorneys. You probably aren't going to make it past summary judgment. If it gets that far, it might just be thrown out on its merits. I've seen that happen too. So, if you want to film in public, you have a right to. If you want to film the cops, you can film the cops. Okay? You can film wherever you happen to be outside. If you've got a legal right to be there, you can film. Now, what can you not film? Look, if you slap a 1000mm telephoto lens on your Nikon, like the one I'm looking at right now, and you use that to peer in the windows into the bedroom of Susie across the street, you're an asshole and you're going to get arrested eventually. Now, if you're using that 1000mm lens to get pictures of the ball player on the other side of the field, that's a different story. That is perfectly acceptable. Okay? If you're using that 1000mm lens to take photos of the military aircraft flying overhead, again, perfectly acceptable.